because of the great confusion and the great misunderstanding that has been permitted to evolve in this area. A confusion and misunderstanding which always existed, was not created by us or by Stanislavski. Actually, Stanislavski helped to clarify a great deal of the confusion and misunderstanding that exists about the problem of the actor. But unfortunately, his conclusions and his understanding and his definitions and his discoveries have become equally confused and equally misunderstood because other people have not been able to share the experiences on which it was based or to understand what it actually was outside of what they read. I know on many occasions I have made it a point to ask professional actors what they get from the reading of the Stanislavski books. And they all claim that, oh, it's very exciting, it's very inspirational, which I certainly would agree with. Because for once you hear somebody talk about acting with some degree of commitment, with some degree of concern, with some degree of responsibility, and with some degree of a desire to understand what goes on in this peculiar art of ours, which is the most direct art that we know of. Not the greatest, not the best, I don't speak in those terms, but it's the most direct art. All the other arts translate human feelings, emotions, experiences, ideas, and so on into other material, into paint, into words, into sound, music, into color and line, painting. Those materials are artistic materials, except let's say for words, which a human being also uses. But the way in which a literary artist uses is of course on a different level and almost for a different purpose, though the basic purpose remains one of communication. The communication is at a much higher level of creation of the thing that you wish to communicate. Everything in life is a process of communication, but the way in which you communicate characterizes the particular nature of each of the arts. Only in acting and in the theater is reality created with the same material with which you live it. A painter feels things, experiences things, he paints. If you don't know how to paint, nothing you can do with it. Everybody experiences something. But that doesn't mean, therefore, that you become a painter. Everybody experiences something. It doesn't mean you become a musician. You have to have some special faculty, some special facility to do that. Everybody experiences and learns to write, but not everybody can write in the way that writers write. It's a special skill. But in acting, the same body, the same emotions, the same mouth with which you speak, and the way in which you speak is exactly what you then do when you act. In fact, if you don't do it, then the acting is bad. And if you do it, often the acting is almost unnoticed. In fact, the better done it is, the less the audience is aware of what the actor is doing, and only when the actor acts to a certain extent with some mechanical definition, he stops, he pauses, says, then we know that he's thinking. Now, I wasn't thinking anything. I just stopped and I paused and I scratched my ear. But I'm a good enough actor, you see, so that I do it easily, what I call casually, naturally, and therefore you assume I'm thinking. It is a sign for thinking. In the same way that all the other arts are signs for experience. Only in the theater and in acting are there no signs. Actually, some people turn that also into a sign language, where the thing is not really happening, but where it's only a sign of, an image of. But only in fine acting and in great acting and in good acting do you get exactly the same thing, the same material, the same beating of the heart, the same flow of the blood, the same flush of the face, the same emotion into the voice, the same emotional behavior and commitment and motivation, and therefore resulting kind of behavior which you get in life. Except that it's much more chosen, it is created, it has to be repeated, It is deliberately arrived at, not in life, where everything is incidentally arrived at. Now, this is part of the understanding, of course, which Stanislavski brought. Actors have always had it. They've not waited for Stanislavski in order to begin acting well, in the same way that the bloodstream didn't wait for Sir John Harvey to discover that it flowed in order to start flowing. Realities do not wait for discoveries in order to start functioning. The discovery simply catches up with the facts of existence. And therefore discoveries are not inventions, are not theories, you see. They are observation of reality, a growing awareness of things as they happen, which help us therefore to control those things, to deal with them to a greater extent than has existed on previous occasions and former times.
I remember one time, after I'd been studying with Lee, I finally did a scene for him that he praised. And he looked at me and he said, "How long have you been studying with me now?" I said, 7 years. And he said, "Yes, that's about what it usually takes." And that's turned out to be true as far as I've noticed. When you worked for him and you did a scene for him, he went right past what you presented to what was going on inside. And he could see, I don't know how to say it, but the words that came to mind was what you were made of. And I don't know if that was accurate, but very often young people are trying to cover what they are. You know, they're afraid that what they are isn't right and isn't good enough. And I certainly did that too. And he would see through that and see the person that was hiding. And all he was asking is that you be completely present with your whole mind, body, and spirit. And not everybody can do that right away. That takes conscious effort. And learning how to be a conscious human being, I finally learned, is the whole task of life. And I think you can learn it through art. I think when someone paints a picture and paints what they see, that there's a process going on that connects them with their essential self. That's what you act with. Those areas that you don't want to go to at all is what you're being asked to speak from and access and utilize in the work. And it's very difficult, and you don't do it just because you get asked to do it. You try to do it and you fail. He uses something called sense memory. I didn't really appreciate the purpose of sense memory. You will have different assignments. Like your first assignment is to create whatever it is you have for breakfast, whatever you drink, like a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or a glass of orange juice. To create it, it's not there in your hand, but you have to create it so you feel it, and you feel the weight of it, and you feel the temperature, so forth. That's the first one. And then you might go to something like sunshine, feeling sunshine, or taking a shower, and all kinds of imaginary things that you are experiencing. The point is to experience them physically, so that you almost feel that water running down your face. Isn't that weird? You know, and you start by creating it on your face, and then I can't describe the process, but I read this sentence recently, a couple of months ago, in a book of Strasberg's, where he said, sense memory trains the instrument, he always called us the instrument, trains the instrument to respond to imaginary circumstances. And that's what I was doing. You know, week after week, he would say, okay, your next sensory exercise is whatever. What I just said. And then you would do a scene. So you were doing two things, sensory exercises and a scene. And then when you're doing a scene, you're working on a character and all kinds of other things. It wasn't until I don't remember where, acting in something professionally. And it hit me that the reason why what I wanted to do was so available to me was because of what that sentence I later learned. I was trained to respond to imaginary circumstances. And that's what the sense memories do. So that it's easy to believe in the fiction because your instrument is trained to do what you tell it to do. Because it's trained to have your senses, your smell, taste, touch, alive to the imaginary circumstances. It's very difficult to get to, but once you get to it, it just makes you an alive, sensitive instrument. It brings you into the present moment of time so that you're here now. Now, meditation does that, and this kind of work does it, because you can fulfill a character and what's needed for a role. If you're sitting in the audience wondering how you're doing, if you're, thinking, oh, I'm hungry, and what am I going to eat after the show? And, if your mind is all over the place, you can't do that kind of work. And it teaches you to be focused, to be in this moment of time and nowhere else. So it is alike, you're right. It's training your mind as well as your emotions and your sensory, all of it.
Of all the elements that we work with, the element that deals with the most direct process of creativity, the most direct relation to creation of reality on the stage, are the elements that deal with the training of the senses and the training of the emotions. All the other things are, to some extent, utilized in other forms of training. Not to the same extent as we do, but to some parallel extent. But only in the area of the work with the senses and the ability to stimulate the emotions, the training of how one stimulates the emotions, which are the ways these two things, the training of the senses and training of the emotions, are what actually happens when imagination is stirred, what you call imagination. Imagination is simply a word for something that you do not understand, so you give it a word, and therefore you think you understand it. When the imagination works, it simply means that realities are occurring without your knowledge, without your awareness, that lead to the same kind of result. When they occur, usually you are not able to repeat them except externally, and that is what we call the French school. The French school did not eliminate reality. On the contrary, they state very clearly, even though they may not be able quite to do it, but they state very clearly that the actor must first of all experience whatever it is he's going to create on the stage. He must at some time or other have experienced it. The only thing is, the point that they make is that the actor then watches carefully to see what he did, observes the way in which he behaved, what he did with his voice, with his body, with his gestures, and so on, and then imitates those external expressions in the hope and in the expectation that it will be enough to give the audience a sense of what it is he's trying to convey, and that it does, but often also in the hope and the expectation that at times something more will happen, this thing that we call then inspiration, And it does happen. In great acting, in fine acting, it does happen. The reality of the way in which you act convinces you. The choice, the things that you have observed, become so real to you that they tune in to the realities that they're connected with, and therefore at that time an emotional memory takes place unconsciously, and since we do not know what it is, we call it inspiration.
Well, I often think that people's greatest obstacle is themselves. You know, access to your own strength is something, you know, I think we're often our own worst enemy. And I always say, you know, for example, people who are interested in writing, it's like, how do I become a writer? It's like, just start doing it, you know, because you fail upwards. I think you can always fail upwards because you can look at your own mistakes. So, you know, I think we're our own greatest obstacle. Regret is a poison.
Yeah. You learn nothing from success, never. There's nothing you learn from success, you know. You learn everything from failing. And fear of failing is what holds people back from doing anything.
Yes.
And and when you don't try and you wake up at 65 years old, you're a lot angrier than if you'd failed. You're a lot, you know, it's really easy to be 65 years old and go, I tried to do that, I just couldn't do it. You'll really be mad if you go, I think I could have done that, but I didn't try.
For me, it's the community, you know, it's that idea of being on stage. There's an audience there. There's this common experience that you're having, which obviously with film is very different. The idea that each day is different. Every performance is a new experience, no matter how many times you do it. There's something, it's alive. You know, it keeps every performance, every day, there's new discovery. It's a living, breathing thing. It really is, you're doing it through movement, you're doing it through energy level, you're doing it through voice. And, I mean, obviously you do that also on film, but you don't have the added makeup and hair and everything else.
I would always start with the script and learn it really, really well, you know, and then see what the other actors are doing. I mean, I read the play loads of times. I read the play loads of times, but no, I'd kind of do it all because it depends on what the other actor. You can't be like, and then the other actor will do this, because the other actor might be like, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. You gotta just do it live, and I think that's what an audience can smell: authenticity. I think you gotta make mistakes. I always spend rehearsal really embarrassed. I always am like, oh God, oh my God, you go really red. Or else there's sort of on takes as well, like when you're filming, you just want to go up to the director and you want to say, burn that. you want to say, don't ever, but that's the really, well, at least in the theatre, you can say, I'm never going to do that again, and that'll be okay. But when you're working on film, you have no control over what take they may or may not use. So you have to go, you have to sort of, sometimes I have said, please don't use that. And they're like, no, I saw some things in that, and I thought it was really nice. And you think, oh no. And then that's inevitably the one that but then actually, it's very hard to judge your own performances. I always think something is terrible and other people think, oh, that's quite good. So, you know, oneself isn't necessarily the best judge of one's own performances. I did a lot of theatre. Mostly theatre when I was starting out, and so when I was started to do more and more film work, that's a difficult thing to get used to. Is that you go, is that it? Shit! Is that, and you because you've been thinking about it for ages, and then you go, oh crikey! I don't think I really got that. I didn't feel right, and I think that's the thing you've got to give up a little bit.
Do you trust the director?
You have to.
Yeah.
No, I don't always trust the director is the answer. But you have to. You have to give it up. You have to go, well, let's hope that's going to be all right. And sometimes it frankly isn't. In the industry, you have to kind of teach people how to treat you a bit. So if you don't want to continue playing psychopaths, then say no. Say no. you know, and that's quite hard to do as an actor. So many people in the industry will say, you're this. Do you know what you are? I'll tell you what you are. You're not a Hamlet. You're this. You know what? You'd be good. And you go, there's any number of people will tell you different things about who you are. And the most important thing is to just have an instinct. It can be very movable and you can change it, but just to go, do you know what? I just feel like I want to do this. And even if you're not doing it at the time, just hold on to that and go, I know nobody can see it and no one has proof of that just yet, but you're in control of what parts you play, whether they're on television, on film, or, you know, within your own little theatre group. Meryl Streep, who's an actress that I admire greatly, says something, and I think it's brilliant, which is, you have to pack your own suitcase. Don't let other people. You know what you're bringing on the journey, and I think it's brilliant advice from a brilliant actress.